Hello and welcome to the Huddersfield Town preview show in association with Sportsbroker. I'm pleased today to be joined by Town fan Sarah Winterburn, who is the editor of Football 365, and Stoke fan Mark Holmes, who works for Planet Sport. How are you both doing this afternoon?
Very well, good.
I
imagine I'm a little better than Mark considering our respective form, but
You are.
It started early. You two are of the same parish. That's correct, isn't it?
We are, albeit this is about as often as we see each other, isn't it, Sarah? The odd video.
Yeah.
I think that's true of most people in most organisations, I think, in this day and age, the odd Zoom call. Thank you for letting me sit in on this Planet Sport meeting today. It's nice. Having worked for you both in a previous life, it's nice to catch up with you both. We're here, obviously, to have a chat about the game on Friday night, about Town and Stoke. Mark, if we're kind and we start with you, do you want to fill us in on how Stoke have been getting on? Because you obviously, in the reverse fixture, you came from behind and beat us 2-1 down in the Potteries, but it's been inconsistent since then. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, very fair. I think O'Neill referenced it after the game the other night. It's almost win one, draw one and lose one, and as a result, we are exactly where you'd expect us to be with that kind of form. It's funny because if this fixture had happened in midweek, I'd have been speaking really positively because we'd won away at Hull, played really, really well, and then lost at home to Fulham, but given them a good go, and there was good signs. And you thought, great, the season starts there, and then we were absolutely rancid. Honestly, so bad as we've been all season in midweek. So now you're thinking, God, we've got Huddersfield next, and they're playing well. And where are we going to finish up now? So you're not going to get much positivity out of me today, which I'm sure you're all going to enjoy.
Yeah, it's the opposite for us, Sarah, isn't it? As Mark had touched on, things are going as well as they possibly could do for Town at present.
I think certainly a lot better than most people predicted and expected at the start of the season. I think most of us, most Town fans I know spoke to, would have taken 14th. I think at the start of the season to be anywhere near the playoff picture feels a bit ridiculous almost. Really, it's like it's sort of a silly game, and we're all going to wake up and actually we're fighting relegation along with Barnsley.
Yeah,
but no, it's 9 matches unbeaten, and I think it's fair to say Town haven't played brilliantly to be 9 matches unbeaten. It's not been scintillating football. But there's a real sort of, I don't know, spirit, I suppose is the old-fashioned way of putting it, but a sort of togetherness about this team, and they don't kind of know when they're beaten, which is nice to see after a few years of Town having to know when they're beaten, because it happened all the time.
Yeah, it has been a run where the performances have ebbed and flowed, but the results have stayed on a constant, which has been nice. That game against Reading at the weekend was ridiculous, 3-3 at half time, and Danny Ward pulling out possibly goal of the season to win it. It does have one of those feelings where when those results are going your way, you think something might be happening here.
Well, I think football, momentum is massively important in football, and sort of much underestimated. I think when you've played football or managed football or even watched football, that feeling of going on the pitch and thinking, we can't get beaten. We've all played in those games or sort of watched those games. And even when you go 1 down or maybe even 2 down, you're still thinking, no, we've got it. And Town seem to be in that kind of run at the moment. I really don't want to jinx them because Town's record against Stoke is... Town's record against Stoke is pretty abysmal, so this could be the one that ends it. But there is a sort of, there's none of that sort of star quality or egos of that team that went up 4 years ago or 5 years ago, whatever it was. But then they're all the better for it, I think, because there's this sort of, like I said, this togetherness and this sort of unity. And there's no big names in there. There's no egos. It's just this sort of togetherness, which is encapsulated in Danny Ward being the hero. Whoever thought that was going to happen?
Yeah, he's having an incredible season. I think we recently published a statistic that he's already levelled his best ever return in the Championship season. I think that was previously when he was at Rotherham. So he's playing remarkably well this year. And like you say, has been an embodiment of what Town are all about this year. Mark, on the other hand, that's Sarah's summation of what Town are and what we're all about. What sums up Stoke? Do you guys have the togetherness? Is there issues with your squad, or what's going on to cause the inconsistencies?
I think I don't want to give Michael O'Neill a complete get out of jail free card, because clearly we've got a good and big squad, and I think he's resolved a lot of the the issues that come out of the Premier League. Most of them, not all of them.
Yeah.
But in his defence, we have had injuries to key players. Suter, clearly by far and away our best defender and up there with the best in the league. Nick Powell, ditto, as a number 10 attacking midfielder, whatever you want to call him. And Tyrese Campbell just hasn't come back yet and found his form. So that in effect is our three best players that we've had to do without for a large portion of the season. And then peripheral players as well that have fallen away due to injuries over Christmas just haven't helped, and there's no momentum in the team. Ben Wilmot's missed the past few games is a big loss for us at the back. So yes, I can point fingers at O'Neill, but I do think he's been unlucky with the injuries that we've had in the positions that we've had just recently.
I think that's probably one of the big differences, because you look at the Town 11, you can probably predict 8 or 9 of them every week. There's very, very little changes there. We know what formation they're going to play. We know pretty much down to a man which 11 are going to play. That might bear against us at some point later in the season when they might be tired, but there's very little variation in there, isn't there? And there's probably been a little bit of luck with injuries this season. They have been consistent in the way he's been able to play. And if you're going to play a system which isn't, it's a little bit pragmatic, certainly at times, it is about that discipline, isn't it? And about being able to sort of spend hours on the training ground so that all those players know exactly what they're going to do all the time. And I suppose Stoke as well, you've signed players in January, haven't you? But it takes a bit of time to kind of get things right again.
Well, it's an interesting one, because you look at the signs we've made in January and it's clearly to try and improve now. We bought Jagielka in, who's 39. We bought Aloni in.
So one for the future there.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you can't allow those players to bed in. Clearly they're bought in to improve us now. That sadly hasn't been the case, certainly in the past couple of games. But the thing, you talk about having a settled 11. I think what Stoke, and this isn't O'Neill's fault, you can point all the fingers in the world at Stoke's transfer recruitment over the years, and it's been terrible. It's not O'Neill's fault that somebody like Sam Clucas comes into the team and it isn't good enough. But you as Huddersfield fans will think, bloody hell, Sam Clucas, what a great midfield they've got. There's plenty of names like that have got big reputations and ultimately aren't good enough. So actually, yes, we have got a big squad and a good squad on paper, but we really need consistency in selection that maybe you guys have benefited from this season.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because both clubs in their own way have had difficulty readjusting to life in the Championship from the Premier League. This is the first year that Town have really been competitive and had a good feeling around the club since returning from the Premier League. It's probably 3 years running, Sarah, wasn't it? That the losses were far outweighing any positives in terms of on the field actions. But Stoke have obviously got high aspirations, which is matched with what you're trying to do in January. I think one of the touch points that, from our perspective that you mentioned is the recruitment that we've got so right this summer. And if we go on to do anything in January, it's a lot around how the fit is with the squad, and that atmosphere that Sarah touched on earlier is a lot to do with personality as much as it is performance, and that seems to have fed in with each other. That the lads in the group now seem to all pull in the same direction, all have similar sort of backgrounds and ethos and all that sort of a thing. And although it can sound a bit woolly sometimes, that clearly is having an effect on the field. Is that something perhaps that the Stoke might be missing a little bit of?
Well, I think that's what Michael O'Neill's trying to do. I say I do give him a slightly easy ride, because he's trying to not only improve the team, but do it whilst working against FFP and sort of resolve all those headaches in the background. So, January specific, he's let Danny Bart go. He's let Adam Davies go to Sheffield United. And, we're playing Jack Bonham in goal, who, we wouldn't have envisaged being anywhere near the team this season, but he's doing that because he kind of has to. There's money on the table for Adam Davies. He's on big money. We let him go. Danny Bart, we let him go and bring Jagielka in on less money, and that's the reason for doing that, really. It's very difficult, and what he's clearly trying to do is bring in younger players with maybe less of an ego, less of a reputation, who fit into a structure in his way of playing, a little bit like what you were saying about Town. But the process is far from complete, really.
Sarah, how do you see the two sides matching up then? Because as you say, Town have been fairly settled. It's interesting that the one game where we did have throw caution to the wind a little bit and play a different system was that Reading game at the weekend. We played with a 4 at the back and mixed it up a little bit compared to the 3 that we'd been playing previously. How do you see these two matching up? It's one of those on paper Friday night under the lights where you expect there to be some entertainment, but how do you see it playing out?
Well, I can't see him throwing caution to the wind against Stoke. I think, this, if I was a betting woman, I'd be looking at a 1-1 or something, because I think this could be tight as hell. Everyone knows where Town's attacking sort of momentum comes from. It comes from those win backs. You negate those, you're halfway towards doing the job, aren't you? So I think, this might be one of those games that unfortunately both teams go into thinking they don't want to lose it. And I think that's the danger with this one, that it could end up being a bit flat. And also, as I said before, I sort of felt kind of optimistic, but I thought, I'll just look up how we've done against Stoke, because I didn't think it was good. I didn't think we hadn't won since 1997 at home. Wow. That's phenomenal, and that was in November of the year that Peter Jackson kicked Town up, and that was Town's first win of the season in November at home to Stoke. Everything else since then has been pretty poor. So, I've not got a massive amount of optimism about this one. I mean, I was there 2 years ago. I took my son to his first ever Town game, thinking I could win him over from Man United by taking him to a Town game. We lost 5-2. He said my team are rubbish, and that's why. And he won't have anything to do with us. So, I'm holding that against Stoke.
Well, you'll have to bring him back another time while we're doing well this season, and hopefully try and persuade him again. Has that made you feel slightly better about things, Mark, hearing those stats?
I must admit, I didn't realise the record was quite that good. I'm trying to think whether I was at that 97 game. I think I probably was. It rings a bell. But you mentioned, your threat coming in the wide positions. We're not great at negating it, actually, particularly down our left-hand side. The past couple of games have been really open.
Sorba Thomas might enjoy that then.
Exactly. Sorba Thomas, a player like that is a worry for me, let's say. But in terms of, the system where you would expect going to play with a 3. I think lots of fans would like him to switch to a 4, particularly if Ben Wilmot isn't fit. But on the basis that we play with a 3, I think you're right, and it's going to be fairly tight and matching each other up really.
Is there any? You mentioned Sorba. Is there anyone else in the Town team that particularly stands out to yourself? It's always interesting to hear, third parties' opinions on our players. Obviously, we've got our own favourites and players that we regularly speak about. At the moment, it's the entire 11. But for an outsider looking in,
I think that's a fair, outside appraisal of Huddersfield as well. I hope you don't mind me saying that. You are a team that comes across as greater than the sum of its parts, and I mean that as a compliment. What I will say, and I'm not just trying to curry favour here, is that when we beat you at home earlier in the season, it was at a time when we were playing well, and you did stand out to me as one of the better teams we played at home, or up to this point, really. So even though we won on the night, I did think Huddersfield will be up there this season. So actually, it's not a huge surprise to me to see where you are. I did think what a good side you were that night.
What about yourself, Sarah? Is there anyone in particular from Stoke's side that stands out as possibly being somebody that could cause Town a few headaches?
I think in terms of that central midfield, to me, I mean, they've got a phenomenal record from long distance, particularly. They hit shots from far out, which is always a worry. I think if you don't close down, they've signed Lewis Baker to go alongside Nick Powell, and there's some talent there, isn't there? It's just kind of getting it right on the night. Goals wise, I think both clubs are kind of missing a sort of real poacher, and so there's a not, which I think might lean into this idea that it might be quite tight, like you say. You can imagine Lewis O'Brien and Jonathan Hogg just getting in really close to those central midfielders and not allowing those shots to come off. But yeah, we're a funny team, aren't we? Stoke are a funny team. I think it's talking about, you said before about Town before, and about that sort of feeling of coming down from the Premier League. And I think that's really important with this Town side, because there's only Jonathan Hogg that sort of remembers that. And I think that's massive, because if you've got that, you can't underestimate that weight of sort of 2 years of, winning single figures of games over 2 years. That must do horrendous things to sort of mentality, to move out of that era. And I think from what Mark's saying is, like, we've moved out of that era quicker than they managed to move out of that. I think possibly because Stoke were in the Premier League for much longer, so they had all this sort of hanging over them, those big wages, those big ambitions, whereas Town were obviously only there for 2 seasons, so the recovery has been quicker, I think. And it's almost like you've kind of not got to think like a Premier League club in the Championship, and I think maybe Stoke have taken a bit too long to sort of move out of that.
Is that a fair sum up?
It is perfect. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking back to our first season in the Championship, when everybody, certainly outside of the club, thought Stoke are going to walk the league, which is always a ridiculous statement when it comes to come down after 10 years. There's clearly big issues. But then Gary Rowett...
Unless it's like Norwich or Fulham, though.
Well, exactly, because they are so used to bouncing. We've been in there for 10 years. The players on Premier League wages, Premier League expectations, Premier League egos and all that. We didn't have any championship-ready players. And then we went and signed a load of players who supposedly were championship-ready. But we did that with the belief that, we're going to go straight back up. So we can give Tom Hensey, 40,000 a week, or whatever we did. So the first batch of signings that we signed in the championship are in essence Premier League players, none of whom pretty much have worked out for us. So we've got those headaches still that we're now finally at the end of this season able to sort of get rid of. But it's been a mess. It's been a real mess.
Is it fair to say, though, Michael O'Neill, you've been through a few coaches since coming down. Michael O'Neill seems to be one that has worked well, not only on the field, but the fans seem to like him. He seems to be bringing in an atmosphere and a style to Stoke that people are buying into.
Well, I mean, that's very much on the precipice at the moment. Yes, in the main, that is true. And certainly I maintain that belief. But that 5-2 game was when he first come in, turned Stoke around, and having never scored more than 2 goals for 2 years or whatever, we were hitting 3, 4, 5. Fantastic. And we thought, wow, what are we going to do the next season? And then that COVID season was a real drag. And then at the start of this season, he brought in players, he improved the style. We were playing really well, nice football. And then as the season's gone on, yes, we've been injury hit, but it's regressed to a pretty depressing mean at times, to be honest. So no, currently a lot of fans are very disenchanted about the style of football we're playing. And I think it's 1 or 2 results away from a lot of people turning, actually. So it's a fantastic time to be playing as it really is. Yeah.
Okay, Sarah, is that sort of music to your ears?
It's made me smile a little bit, that, yeah.
First time for everything.
Is this, like Mark said, is it perhaps then a good time to be playing Stoke if this is the mood around the club, or is it? We've seen it a couple of times actually. Nottingham Forest, when they came here, people expected Town at that point. They'd not won a game in the league. Town were doing really well to roll those over. It didn't happen. Cardiff City away stands out as a distinctly bad memory from this season. With, I think it was Morrison's first game in charge there. He wasn't even permanently in charge at that point. Is this one of those where people are making such an assumption that it's going to go one way that it quite possibly can go the other? Because
I think there's certainly something to be said for this particular Town team not particularly reacting well to being the favourites in the game. I think it sort of suits them to be a little bit more sort of reactive. There have been times this season, and probably that Stoke game there is one of them, where you think Town have probably scored a bit early, and you don't really need that to happen on Friday, because there's this tendency to go retreat, and then sort of mess it up. Where we're almost better when we go behind and kind of can have a go a little bit and open up a little bit. So maybe going into the game with this sort of against an opponent that are sort of on their knees maybe doesn't suit Town that much. And there's always that thing as well, isn't there? You don't know how much Stoke have been affected by what happened in midweek. Are they the wounded animal, or are they? You don't know, do you? Sometimes you get that sort of bounce back, because they've been fired up a little bit by that kind of defeat. But I don't know. Like I say, I would stick to my guns that it was going to be a 1-1. To be honest, I wouldn't expect this one to be pretty.
Okay, I was going to close the show by asking for a score prediction. So you've gone one ahead there, Sarah. So I'll take your 1-1. What about yourself, Mark? Are you going to stay loyal to Stoke, or are you going to go with your pessimism?
I was going to say this is when I surprise you by going 4-0 to Stoke. Joking apart, I do think it will turn for us, because some of the players, Philogene Badesi we brought in from Villa looks exciting. Powell came back in midweek. It will click for us. I do genuinely believe that. And whereas we haven't put a run together in terms of wins this season, equally, we haven't gone on too many losing streaks. So, we are pretty good at bouncing back. So I am going to also...
4-0.
Yeah, 4-0. I'm going to go 1-1. I think it's a really good prediction, that score draw.
Okay, well, 1-1. If everyone's got any spare pennies, then they know how to head to the bookmakers with them. Thank you very much for your time, both of you. Hopefully we'll catch up with you both another time on the show. And thanks again to Sportsbroker for sponsoring the show.
Thank you.